We're going to start quickly with the minutes from the last meeting. Have people had a chance to read them? Yep. Okay, perfect. Can I get a motion? Are there any corrections? Okay, I got a motion from Mariah, a second from Andy. Are there any corrections? No? Okay, seeing none. Mariah
Yes.
and Andy
Yes.
and Val, who is now our new member on the committee.
I was just going to ask, Val, have you joined us?
I didn't even know till just now. So.
Abstain.
Okay, great. And the chair votes yes. Okay, we're good. Melissa, welcome. I'm really glad you made it.
Hello, everyone.
So the first order of business that we're going to talk about is the request for use of American Rescue Plan Act funds. And I guess, the first thing that maybe even before we start, Susan's here with us too. Yeah, good. Melissa, usually when the town gets new funds, according to this town school partnership, we split those funds 50-50, any new revenue. And so my thought is that that's what should be happening here too. Since that's what
Didn't
our
it
usual...
change even, Melissa, to 60-40?
So that's general fund revenue. And we also have specific requirements for this grant. So we can't exactly apply the same formula to the grant that we do with general fund.
Okay, we'll go to 50 then. Instead of 60.
No, I understand that the schools definitely are interested in spending these funds. And just like we did with CARES, we are not leaving you in the dust. We plan on engaging with you, and just like we are with everyone else, and soliciting projects. Where tonight at the board meeting, we are launching our public portal so that requests can be submitted. I had a meeting yesterday with department heads. I don't remember if Sam was at the meeting, but I think he was invited, and I recorded it. So I'm going to be pushing it out as well for department heads so that they knew the process for submitting requests as well. So, we know that there are a lot of needs on the school side as well, where this funding can be used.
Okay, but we're not exactly a department. I mean, we're, I understand the department heads who are, under your purview, but we're sort of a little bit separate from the department heads, I would think, in a different category. Matt?
Yeah. Well, Helen, to your point, yes, the school committee is a separate board, separate legal entity that separates sort of the schools from the town. So it's a little different. But Melissa, question in regards to that is, does the town already have the funds on hand, or do we still have to apply to get them from the state/federal government?
So we're getting the money in two pieces, and we've gotten our first piece. We are engaging with the board on a process for community engagement and solicitation of projects that then will essentially provide us with the structure on how these requests are going to be vetted. And there are a lot of grant requirements we need to make sure that people are able to meet before we, release funding. So we need to make sure that people are aware of the eligible uses, and then what the requirements are for those uses.
So tongue in cheek, in true school fashion, we want to jump the line. We have a project that has already largely been vetted through the design process of Driscoll. It was geothermal. It was something that was definitely publicly discussed. And then due to budgetary constraints, when the project was bid out, we weren't able to afford the project. We had to value engineer it out when it was rebid. And so now we're interested in seeing if we could still secure a funding source through these federal grants to pay for geothermal, in the obvious spirit of being greener and getting closer to net zero, and reducing our overall energy consumption. Because as a 30-second summary, we want to pump the 50-degree water up from the ground and then heat or cool from that, as opposed to using the outside air. And
Yeah, I
that's,
mean, I think that, you know, there are plenty of other people that have already expressed interest in these funds. So, you
Yep.
know, last week we had an appeal from Neil Wyshynski on needs for a comprehensive plan in town. And, you know, a few weeks prior, we had, you know, some emails from the Housing Advisory Board and the BHA on their needs. So
yeah.
I
And
would
my,
say,
yeah,
I
my
would say,
request for jumping the line is because come August 12th, with the project underway, I'll say both the price goes up, the project schedule gets delayed, and there's other costs that are kind of with it. So not that, you know,
so
And,
then
going,
my response to that, and I spoke with Helen yesterday and told her the
Okay.
same thing, come to the board meeting tonight and appeal to the board, because we're gonna be talking about this very topic. And we need someone to, you basically make this request. I can't tell you yes or no.
Understood.
I need the board to provide me with that, you know,
kind of
guidance.
direction.
So Melissa
And-
and Matt, can I just ask, this is the general ARPA you're talking about and not the new ARP ESSER money that you can use for infrastructure?
No, this would be the infrastructure funds, the 32,
The-
is it 32.4?
no,
So that is not, infrastructure is not an eligible use. There's a difference between the infrastructure bill that is yet to be passed that is imminent.
No, the infrastructure under ARPA, under the Department of Ed regs. Lots of infrastructure are
I
allowed
think
use,
that's,
right?
that's,
So
Val, if I'm not
separate.
mistaken, that's separate. That's the $4 million that the schools got that went just to local education authorities. But this is the 30, I think
it's
it's,
32, 3.
32.
no, 34, isn't it? How much is
No,
it,
30.
Melissa?
32.
32 million. Okay, we'll talk about the
We
same
were
amount.
told 34 earlier, but then it materialized as 32. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, because I knew I had 34 in my
Yeah,
head.
you weren't wrong. It changed. Yeah.
Okay. But I still think that we need to talk about this in town school partnership. I don't want to come to the board and start arguing at the board about this. I think there needs to be that's what town school partnership is about. Wouldn't you think, Mariah?
Ultimately, it's a board decision, though. Two people who come to the partnership meeting can't represent a 5-person board.
Well, I think though that the town school partnership does have decision making delegated to it though, Melissa, and to whatever extent we are discussing and agreeing things there that are then being brought to the other boards. I do think it's important. There is a reason that I've been asking like every 10 days, like clockwork, if we can have a meeting, because I do think it's really important that we have these discussions. The thing that I would point out, and I hear what you're saying, Melissa, about this is a decision of the board. I agree with Helen that I'm not sure us showing up tonight feels like the right place to do that. It does. I mean, is there a section of the agenda where other boards are going, is there a public comment for this particular item? It doesn't quite feel right to me. But the critical thing here too is that if we miss this window, as Matt alluded to, we're going to add up extra costs, project delays, and then further, if we are able to buy into this project using geothermal, there's lower operating costs as well, right? So there's actually a significant benefit to being able, in terms of benefit back to our operating budget, to be able to invest these capital funds.
There's a return on investment here.
I don't think anybody's arguing about the merits of this. I think what I'm hearing Melissa say is that she can't give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
No, I hear that too. I'm just, my
The
point is
board has made
tonight the right place?
Well, this seems to be a very time-sensitive issue. So when else would you think of doing it?
Yeah, we don't want to ask
If
the
you wanna get your
Board of Selectmen to
if-
have a separate meeting.
Excuse me, if you want to get your oar in the water, then I suggest you go to the select board meeting tonight and express your proposal and then ask them what they think the next step should be. I think that's probably the best way to go.
It doesn't seem, that's not usually the way we do things with
Fine,
Board
but
of Select-
these are extraordinary times, Helen, and I think everybody
well,
understands.
but we've been asking for the town school partnership, as
And
Mariah said.
so has the advisory committee.
So we're all doing this, the same thing, which makes much more sense. That's where we usually discuss these issues.
That's correct. We do, but we haven't had a meeting, and now you've got a deadline of August 12th. And so I don't see that you've got too many other options. I mean, I don't know how many other extremely time sensitive proposals are floating around, but we know that yours is. And
And
if you don't have too many other options, I suggest you make, your statement and say you realize this is highly unusual, but.
And the board isn't meeting again after tonight until August 31st. So this is your last board meeting before your deadline.
But ultimately, if the select board as the executive of the town is responsible for signing off ultimately on all these, on the funding, then, whether the school town partnership meets and strongly encourages the board to do it, you still need the board to do it. So I guess my feeling is, under these extraordinarily difficult and unusual circumstances, Mariah, I'm with you 100%. It would have been much better for the TSP to meet last month, but didn't happen. And now this is the way the table's been set. So.
Well, let's, Matt, was there something that you?
Yeah, if the committee wants, I'm available to represent them tonight, but let's hear what the process is. We have Jim Rogers here from left field, and Jen Carlson from left field, and Linda Callahan from Gilbane, and they're the folks that would largely help us see this implementation and can answer some of the questions. So if folks are okay with that, we could turn it over to Jim, and Robin, when he's ready, he may want to share his screen.
Can I just jump in here 1 second?
Sure.
How much is there in contingency for Driscoll at the moment? Could you possibly use the whatever amount you need for geothermal and take it from the contingency now? I mean, as I said, I don't think anybody's doubting the merits of this proposal. If you've got to commit to it before the 12th and you don't think it can happen any other way, could you use money within the budget, the construction, or the total project budget, I should say, not the construction budget, but the project budget?
Yes, we could. We would need someone's approval to do that, but we could certainly, in a sense, advance fund this portion of the project, right? Using total project funds to do that. We could certainly do that on a cash flow basis easily, because we're just starting the project now. So there's plenty of money in the account, so to speak. So that's possible. That would be, I think, a rather risky adventure. You folks know your approval process more than I do, but doing that in advance of those funds being approved would be very risky.
And I'm not sure the building commission would approve that.
Well, that's right. We physically have the funds to do it. Whether we get the approval to do it is beyond my pay grade, as they say.
My initial thought for that would be no. We haven't started digging yet, and so we don't know what the volatile organic compounds are for removal in the soil or the water. There are certain unforeseen conditions at the beginning of every project, and you don't know what they are until you actually get into the actual ground there. So, and that's supposed to start in the next few days to early next week, is my general understanding. But
yes.
I'm not comfortable asking for that at this point. It's just a timing thing. I mean,
hold on a second.
Yeah.
Another thought that I have in terms of, timing, Melissa, it's not unheard of that the selectmen have a special meeting or schedule a new meeting if they have to.
Every week we were supposed to be off in July. We had a special meeting. So we met more in July than we normally do.
Okay, so it can continue. There's not, okay. You answered my question. Thank you. All right, why don't we hear from Jim about what entails?
Sure.
And
So we originally bid this geothermal project as part of the overall project in March. We got pricing back that was well over the budget. I think at that point, my team can remind me where I might be incorrect, but I think it was somewhere about $5.9 million over the budget at that point. We had to VE the project. One of the casualties of that value engineering was geothermal. And in fact, when we went out the second time, the first time we went out in March, it was an ad alternate. We were in such tough financial shape the second time we went out and had to actually take $6 million out of the project before even talking about the ad alternate. We did not include that as an ad alternate in the May pricing, in the second round of pricing. We were successful in getting the project back under budget, but at that point we did not have geothermal in the project. Jen, do you want to throw up, if you would put up our latest budget for geothermal? So back then, we were somewhere around a $3.1 million scope for geothermal.
Wasn't that without the savings that we would have from some other parts that we wouldn't be doing?
I don't recall that, Helen, that's possible. There was some slight electrical savings that we were picking up.
There must be some things we're not going to be using if we're using geothermal.
Yes, so let me, there's a couple of, these are the ad alternate pieces here, okay? These are the pure ads, Helen. So we had, site work was 2.8 million. So we hired Dorenzo as part of the GMP. They are the awarded site work subcontractor within Gilbane's contract. They have a price of 2.8 million. That was back in March. Linda, who's the senior project manager for Gilbane on this project, who's on the Zoom with us right now, is going to go back to Dorenzo and see where we are now against that 2.8 million. We don't know if they're going to hold it. We don't know if they're going to increase it. We don't know what they're going to do with it. So, but the original budget had Dorenzo back in March at 2.8 million. There's a mechanical cost increase of 650,000. That the cost ranged from 350 to 650 back then in March when we were looking at geothermal, and we had at alternate pricing. So we put the more conservative price in here of 650, not knowing where our mechanical sub is going to end up now, because we have to go back now and ask for change order pricing rather than at alternate pricing. And then when we include these two subcontractors back under Gilbane's contract, I had a 10% for their sub cost plus a 3% fee to Gilbane. So all in all, we're at a $3.8 million add for the hard costs related to geothermal. To that, there are then two smaller soft cost components. Jonathan Levy's office needs to do some more work with the model, and they need to
Why?
they have to understand the electrical load from geothermal as it relates to their current model. They didn't take it as far as doing the modeling for both, so they have to do the impacts to the model. And then if we do go with geothermal, McPhail would have to be on site monitoring that as part of construction administration. So that would be an add. So there'd be an add, Helen, of 80,000 in round numbers for additional soft costs. I added a 10% contingency because again, these were kind of numbers that we had before, not knowing where they might go now. And it brings the geothermal budget to, just under 4.4 million as a not to exceed. So this is a conservative budget based on, trying to go out now and ask people for change pricing when the project's been released. We would try to get this closer to our original numbers when we had at alternate pricing. We do our best to get down there, but if we were going to ask the town for funds today in a conservative fashion, so we didn't have to come back again and either impact the project's own budget or come back to the town again, we feel that the $4.4 million number here is a safe number to request. And as Matt said, on a go no-go basis, we'd have to know, could we get access to this 4.4 million or get some type of approval by August 12th?
So that's 25% of the money that the town now has in the bank.
Okay.
And that strikes me as a pretty daunting percentage for the board to consider.
Can I get clarification? Is this, is this the additional budget or is this the total geothermal budget and we're reducing it by what we wouldn't have spent on the,
Sorry, this is the total ad for
Okay.
geothermal.
There's no reductions here.
and this is the same amount that was discussed before, or it's
No.
gone up?
It's gone up. Before, we had 2.8 million for the site work. And one of the subs had 350,000 for the HVAC, but the cost range from 350 to 650. We don't know what the right range is until we go back and ask the mechanical sub that we've now hired for his pricing. We've put, again, I've been very open and transparent here. We put the highest sub cost there in the range from 350 to 650. I put the 650 in to make sure that, again, we don't need to come back to this committee again.
But that HVAC person also has less costs in certain things. I mean, there's got to be some sort of trade-offs here.
The
Some
the understanding that I have is we could pick up some costs with electrical if we reduce the generator from, I think it's 900 kW to about 400 or 500 kW. And we also get rid of the temp electric boiler.
Mhm.
So there would be some costs in reducing those two items. I could possibly.
You mean
show-
some savings?
Yep, so I could possibly show some savings from those two items. Yep.
And, okay.
But I will say this, if we don't get the go-ahead by the 12th, we would have to release the 900 kW boiler and go for it. And just probably add more things to it and not pick up any cost. In fact, in that point, there'd be added costs. So this assumes we get the approval by the 12th, some additional savings to your point by the committee here. We could get some additional savings. If we know by the 12th what we're doing, we could hold off on the generator that we were about to order the lower KW generator and receive a credit to the project.
And that could be almost $1 million if I heard you right.
I don't know that. I'd
You
have to.
just said 900K for the boiler.
No. Sorry. It's 900 kW kilowatt. Sorry,
Oh.
Helen. My apologies. We're going from 900 kW to 400 kW. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
This is Andy here. I'm trying to make sure that I'm comparing this new figure to the correct previous figure that I've seen.
Yep.
So the other document I have about this is from January, where the delta for having the geothermal versus just the base bid HVAC system is 2.7 million.
That's exactly the number I remember.
Yeah, it was
So
2,750 or
how did
something
it
like that.
increase by so much in a few months?
Yeah, I don't know, Jen or Linda, I think that 2.7, and you're absolutely right, Andy, that's what it was. I think that was site work only. It didn't include the electrical, the HVAC, or the plumbing, but I don't recall why it was 2.7 below the line. Linda, do you have any history there of why we're showing 2,750,000 below or 2,700,000 below the line? Andy's absolutely correct. That's what we were claiming at that point.
So Jim, at the time we were projecting, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. At the time that we were showing those projections, we also had contingency dollars using, it was calculating in the equation to show what was left to fund it. So that's where the 2.7 was coming from. But again, the site piece alone has been 2.8 since day one on the Dorenzo. And then with regard to the HVAC, as we've outlined here, the high is 650, and we would need to validate a current number.
The
you know,
January
against-
number is a cost estimate.
Correct.
The March number was the first bid.
So can I understand something? The 2.8 million are the actual wells?
Yes, very good,
Yes.
Helen. Yep.
The
Okay.
50 wells, yes.
50.
Yeah.
And is that what they determined was necessary? Because I had heard 40 in the beginning, but maybe I'm off.
That's
Yeah, they-
actually, 50 was reduced. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yep.
The original design way back when, I believe, was up in the 80s, and then it was revised to 49, I'll say, Helen, is what they came in with on the final design.
And the HVAC work wouldn't they have to do HVAC work no matter what HVAC system they put in?
No, well, this is the added mechanical work required for the geothermal, Helen. There's some additional work needed, including, the boiler and the
The Adriatic coolers.
that's what it is. It's the coolers. Thanks. Thank you, Linda. And I want to point everyone to the title of this too. It's a not to exceed budget. We know that we're higher here than we were before. Our job is going to be to drive this, closer to the 3.1 or 3.2 where we were before. It's just we're at a different time. We're in a more volatile market. We're coming back as change order pricing rather than alternate. So we're still going to drive this. This is a number that we hope we will come well in under. We just don't want to have to come to this, to the approval committees again to ask for more money. We're trying to be conservative here. We understand in comparing back, it's higher than we were before. We're doing that to make sure we're covered. And again, our goal is going to be when we have these discussions, if we have these discussions based on approvals with the various subcontractors, that we drive this number down.
Well, I would hope so. I would hope
Yeah.
that there'd be a lot of, sharpening of the pencils
Yep.
there.
Can I ask one more question about the
Sure.
costs?
Please.
Do we have, given whatever else has changed from January to now, and there was a previous report on the ROI, is there updated numbers on that as well?
There aren't, and that's an excellent question, right? We need to do that as part of any presentation. So I think, and maybe this is I don't know if Warner wants to jump in here or whomever. We don't have an engineer on the phone with us, but originally even geothermal was challenged, I think, on a return on investment in terms of the number of years. And Matt or Linda, I think we were, somewhere between 20 and 30 in terms of the return on investment, at least in terms of number of years. I think people were willing to make that investment based on our carbon footprint, reduction. But we have not run those same numbers. Those are based on the 2.8 to 3.1 numbers we were before. Those aren't based on a $4.4 million budget. So
and it was based on borrowing the money as opposed to paying up front.
Very good.
Because
Yes,
the return on investment begins the first year.
That is true. So those that recalculation on ROI has not yet happened, where this is all a very fluid situation. We would need to do that, and we're talking about maybe doing that ahead of a building commission meeting we have on Tuesday. I don't think we would have that for this evening for a presentation to whatever approving authority. Was it the select board you're talking about going to tonight? For that meeting tonight.
Well, I don't think Melissa, correct me. Okay, does everybody's, I didn't take a picture of them. You'll send this to us?
Yeah, I can send this by email for sure, Helen.
Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to show?
Can I make a comment about the ROI?
Please.
So I'm not in any way.
Werner, maybe you can introduce yourself so that.
I'm sorry. I'm Werner Lowy. I'm co-chair of the Select Board's Climate Action Committee. I'm a member of the Climate Action Brookline, a town meeting member too. So say I'm not challenging the ROI calculation that was made in any way. It seems like what it came down as saying that if you, over the long term, the capital costs, would not be completely offset by savings and operating costs later. But we still sort of made a judgment. The fact that it was put in as an ad alternate was a reflection of the fact that, as a town, we said, well, we should still try to pursue this if we can bring the whole project in under budget. The reason it got cut out was because the whole budget became too tight.
Exactly.
So to me, it seems like, it's always good to have that information, but I don't think that's critical. And, and ROIs are kind of complicated anyway, because it's based on a projection of what electricity is going to cost And there's a number of people that say 10, 20, 30 years from now, electricity costs are going to be down. You can't base anything on that. But the bottom line is that if we were to go forward now using this federal money, what happens? Number one, when I'm given my interest in climate, number one, we have real savings in CO2 emissions, but also by using this federal money, there was also no doubt that we use less electricity with ground source heat pumps, with geothermal, and what that means is by putting the money in now, we reduce for the school committee and for the town. Therefore, over the long term, we're reducing operating costs by having an opportunity to use this federal money to invest in the capital costs upfront.
Well
Thank
said.
you, Werner. If we could take off the your screen, I could see if there's anybody else who has any thoughts or wants to comment here. Charlie, I see you're on here too. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the geothermal.
If I could offer one more comment, Helen, I know you're opening up to the group, but if we decide to hold off that decision and hold up the ordering of equipment, because of the process we went through with the multiple bidding rounds with this project and ultimately the VE process that took 6 million out of it, we are very much against, against the challenge. We're still very much up for the challenge, but it's very much a challenge achieving September of 23, right, for the opening of the school. If we were to push this decision out because we wanted to try to do the right thing and bring geothermal in at a later date, and we held up the ordering of the generator and some of the larger mechanical equipment, I really do think it would push out September of 23, which would have further cost and other implications to the town. So I do want to talk about the seriousness. We spent a lot of time talking about the budget, but I do want to talk about the seriousness of where we are from a schedule perspective and our ability to hit that September of 23 date.
So Linda, when are you going to be ordering this stuff?
Right now, the submittal is in for approval, Helen, and based on the lead time of the generator, it's running 26 to 30 weeks. With that being said, the location of where the generator is being installed is in the basement. The structural steel will be going up basically just after we get this generator in. If there's any delay to this process, I'm not going to be able to get that generator installed in the basement. Once the decking goes on the first level, my access point is gone.
What happens if we have to replace it?
You'll be taking it out in pieces.
But then you can't put another one in.
There's no area way to cut in to the basement.
Wait a
Jim,
second. So we could never replace it if it died some sort of terrible death?
Again, it would be dismantled in place.
But then how would the next one get in, to Helen's point?
They would have to bring it in pieces.
Charlie, what do you do with generators? Have we ever had to replace them? Charlie, I hope you're there. I see you, but I don't see you.
We replace them all the time. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm having a little difficulty in the office today with my PC. Yeah, we were replacing them. We have been replacing them, but I usually just take them out, the boiler room door, or it's usually in a side room. It's the first I'm hearing that you can be able to get to it in the future. I mean, ideally the generator will last 20, 25 years.
But we can't build something that's not going to be able to be replaced if it only lasts 25 years.
I think this is a question for GGD as to how that happens.
We'll get that answer for the committee.
Okay, terrific. Yeah. All right. If it could be placed in later, Linda, then then it's not as critical, right? The timing. And not that I want to push it out.
Yeah, I don't think so, Helen, right? We would just need to see if there's any reconfiguration with the underground system that's being, coordinated to feed that generator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that there's feeds where they need to be.
Right. Okay. All right. Does anybody? Yeah, Carla.
I just wanted to mention that the building commission is meeting this evening and Driscoll is on their agenda.
This evening or next week?
I thought it was.
I think it's
Sorry.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 10th.
Yeah, they always meet on the second Tuesday, not the first.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's ascending date is the 3rd. Never
Yeah.
mind, sorry.
Okay.
So we're going to follow up with this committee on the generator placement, to Helen's excellent question, to are there any further credits to these at alternate pricings, or were these, net of credits? We'll find that out. And we'll discuss some further information around ROI, depending on its importance to this discussion. Again, some folks, don't believe it's not necessarily an ROI question, but a more question about the right thing to do, and that's for the community to decide. But we do need an answer quickly, and I don't know what we'd want to go in front of the select board with tonight if we wanted the chance to hit that 8/12 date.
Okay. Please remember also when you're doing those figures, the temporary system that you were going to put in, but now you won't have to necessarily put in.
Right. I just have to verify whether that mechanical add alternate or electrical add alternates took that into account already. It's a net number or just an add. So I will. That's part of my follow up for you, Helen. I'll do that.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts, or before we sort of figure
Matt,
out
anything else, Matt?
Yeah, so, thank you, Melissa and Carla, Warner, everybody else for coming. So I guess, it seems like we have to ask tonight, and it's a little awkward to do it on short notice, but that's sort of the timing of the project, or waiting, costs more money and creates more problems. So is there any reason why this committee shouldn't vote that we submit a request to the Board of Selectmen to, request funds for this particular project at the not to exceed amount, and we would obviously turn back what we don't need to use.
anybody
Well,
have
that was a conversation stopper, huh?
any?
Do you want me to say something, Helen, or should I be quiet?
No, I'd like you, Mariah, to say something.
I guess I'm having a hard time with this right now. It's a lot of money, and Werner, you make compelling points about carbon emissions, but I don't feel like I have the whole story here at my fingertips to feel like I could confidently say that this makes sense. Especially, I'm making this up, but let's give an example of another compelling project that the town might want to do that does have maybe an even greater green impact. And so I am always wanting to be, sorry, Val, I think I'm getting feedback from you. Thanks. So I guess I'm just struggling with it right now.
All right,
Well,
not to add to your struggle, but this is also consuming a large portion of what could be the broadest use. So if there are other school uses, I mean, that's just something to consider as well. Because not all of this is the 32 million is not kind of available for all things.
Right, there's that too.
Mm-hmm.
There's that too. So I just feel like there's a lot of moving pieces. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer on what's an exciting, compelling use, but it's hard to know, will it be the most compelling use when we put it within context, especially given that it's not the fossil fuel free or not fossil fuel free. We're going to have a fossil fuel free choice either way.
I guess my thought is that I must say I'm shocked by the price, Jim. That it's gone up almost to double what we were thinking. Well, maybe a third more, and that's upsetting. That could happen within just within 6 months. And I understand the markups. I know what happens, but if it's the same company who bid the HVAC bid the alternate, back when? Or it's a different one?
No. So we, in fact, the HVAC company that we ended up hiring this, with the second round of bidding did not include an alternate once because he wasn't part of the first round. So we don't even have alternate pricing from this mechanical person, which is why when we looked at the sub pricing and it went from 350 to 650, we said, well, to be conservative, let's pick the 650 of the ad alternates we did receive from the first round of bidding, not from the actual sub that we selected in the second round of bidding. So that's why we picked the 650 again. And our goal is, I would say the price would probably come in somewhere between the 3.1 and the 4.4. We're just not confident with, this late breaking news to tell you where on that spectrum it's going to fall, but it's a not to exceed number. We drive it down as much as we could have. There's some folks that might say that the 2.8 per site might come down because the cost of steel has come down, blah, blah, blah. It's about wells. So if it could come in under the 2.8, the original price. I don't know that sitting here, and I wouldn't be responsible saying that today. That's the problem. If you're asking me today what the price is, it's 4.4 million. If you're asking me to have these conversations with the subs, line it all up, I could be, closer to 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. I don't know until I have those conversations. I haven't had those conversations, so I'm hedging my bet. But I have called it a not to exceed budget. We do want to work with the community to get to get you what you want, and we do want to get it at the price you want. So we are going to drive this conversation down, and we are going to tell the site sub, we think your number never mind should go up, should come down. So those conversations are absolutely going to be had. We just haven't had them yet.
Okay.
But I will say the only other thing I'll say is, having been involved in this project, since town vote, I have been in many different committee meetings, a wide spectrum of committee meetings, who all felt that the geothermal made sense from a holistic town perspective. So I have been a part of many presentations to many different stakeholder groups that all seem to like this as part of this project, which is why we're working with the town and making the effort and trying to see if we can put it back in.
So I'd like to suggest the following to the committee, possibly as a interim solution. I hear the August 12th, that's next week.
Right, it's a week from Thursday or Friday or something, yeah, yes. Right, it's a week from Thursday. It's tight.
And you said you'd have the numbers for the building commission.
That we would try to get some more of the return on investment numbers for the building commission, yeah, based around these numbers. And again, let me say this too, Linda, do you think, I'm gonna go off the rails a little bit here, but Linda, do you think we could start having some of these discussions with the subs prior to knowing whether this is real or not, and act as if it's real, and try to see if we can hone in some better numbers over the next 4 or 5 days? Do you think that's possible?
We would just need to verify with JLA that the previous version of documents is the correct ones to be using.
Right. If you remember, I had some additional JLA design costs there. They felt like they did need to spend a week or two on the drawings, I think, to validate.
A week or two, they don't have that.
I know. Well, once the project got approved, they would then go do it. So it's kind of, that's why it's kind of a chicken or egg game here.
Well, but then we're going to be paying change orders if they change the
Well,
design.
we wouldn't, right. But I think we could probably take a temperature with the sub and see where they might be based on current drawings.
Uh-huh.
Linda, what do you think about that?
Yes, we can start that process. I don't know what the timeline would be for our HVAC guys, since they didn't submit in the first round. That's the only item that.
Right, we'd have to get in the latest drawings and say go, but it's probably going to take them a week to price that up, I would think.
Well, because it's the first time he's pricing it.
Exactly.
Whereas Griffin's already looked at it and.
The electrician.
Yeah, so.
And the site work person looked at it.
Yes.
Yeah, the site work, Helen, I don't see as a big lift. I think they just need to resurrect the conversation with their bidder on that particular item, right? Because there's been months worth of time that have passed, so they just need to verify that pricing as submitted is either current or, needs to be improved, if you will.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
at the
and while
scope
you're
this
doing
year.
it, maybe to check on the amount of wells needed or the depth of the wells so that, if,
I think that
Yeah.
is set in place.
huh?
I think that is set to Linda's last point. I think that is set.
I think the only way we get good news there is if while they're digging, they find a lot more water pressure and cooling tonnage than they did in the test wells in another area. That
Right,
would-
the test well, Matt, to your point, was what allowed us to reduce the number of wells in the design. The findings from
Mhm.
that information that they had gathered back at,
Right.
I believe that was April vacation, if I'm not mistaken.
And they'd sort of have to get, for lack of a better way to say it, lucky again with a lot of cooling tonnage and a lot of water flow to reduce the number of wells again. And you can't really plan on that to happen. It's just nice when it does.
So all that being said, my thought is the following, and committee, I need your sort of thoughts on this too. I would suggest that, the team go ahead, full speed ahead to figure out the real cost of where this is going to land by the time of the building commission. And maybe the capital subcommittee could set up a meeting on Wednesday to
Wednesday,
try-
the 11th, or which Wednesday we're talking about?
yeah,
Next
that-
Wednesday?
Wouldn't
yes.
it be the Tuesday before the building commission?
Or the Wednesday
Oh, I
after.
guess, yeah, would we want to hear it before the building commission hears it? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Matt?
yeah, I mean, so if the Board of Selectmen and the building commission are okay with it and we're the ones asking for it, kind of seems late to
Yeah,
wanting to change anything after the fact.
It would seem it would be a lot stronger to go to the building commission with this committee's approval, personally.
Yes, and the Board of Selectmen.
do people feel comfortable with that?
Does the
what
select board know, does the select board know that this request might be coming? Like, has anyone laid the groundwork with at least Heather and Miriam, like previous and current co-chairs of the Driscoll Building Committee who are also on the select board?
Miriam's
Didn't she
Yeah.
take over Heather's role?
Yeah, she did.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I was totally lost.
I mean,
on that.
if this is just going to hit them out of nowhere, I don't see anybody approving something like this on the spot.
I did mention it briefly to Heather, but I can't say, I didn't have enough information to lay groundwork as the way I would think about groundwork. I just don't know enough, other than it was coming or we were talking about it.
I mean, I understand about the urgency is you can't even get the capital subcommittee of the school committee to sign off on something when it hits us like this.
Right.
I don't see the select board saying yes either, unless they know what's coming.
Just to be clear, what's driving the urgency for the 12th as opposed to another date is the generator? Is that clear?
Yes.
So that may give us a little more breathing room.
The thing we could look into, I'll go here, is to, and Linda can kick me under the table if she could reach me, but is to
We'll watch your face.
is to order the larger, go ahead and order the larger 900 kW generator, and it would be oversized for the project, and we have to check with the engineer, would that be okay? And maybe we could attach some more to it at a cost, but maybe to keep this going, we could go ahead and order the larger generator, not capture that credit for the smaller generator, but it would keep us in the game.
Jim, you're saying the way
Or-
the larger generator would be used is we could just hook it up to generate and to have more backup light and electricity in the building.
Exactly. We could put more backup things on it, Matt.
Okay, just so everybody understood.
Right.
What you meant.
That would come at a cost, but maybe the question is, could we function with a larger generator like that and not do anything? If the answer is yes, that's an easy one. We just lose out on a cost savings. But then maybe it would be desirable for the community to add some other backup to it. you know, you could even make it a backup shelter or something at some point if we wanted to go there, but that's a total discussion for another day. But anyway, we'd have additional capacity potentially if we just went ahead and released the larger generators. That's I guess my big point.
And Linda, what is the difference in cost between the two generators? We can't hear you.
You're
Linda.
on mute,
Linda, you're on mute.
Sorry, in the first round, there was $100,000 savings presented under the alternate number 1 for the electrical. So I'm anticipating that.
Oh, so I mean, it's not bupkis, but it's not a huge amount.
It's not $1 million, no.
It's not $1 million or even a couple of $100,000. Okay. All right. So if we were to you know.
so if we
not
did
hold up-
that, we could buy ourselves, you know, maybe another, you know, couple of weeks, get us to the end of August to then start getting some traction here. I guess it's good to know, you know, is there an appetite at 3.3? Is there an appetite at 3.8? Is there an appetite at 3.9? You know, what's the, when
I
does-
Do
think
we have,
2.8
I'm
is
confused. Do we have an option that is at 3.8?
no, but as we
I
get
guess-
more, as we get more information, you know, and we determine it's something lower.
And I think also it'd be helpful to understand sort of, is the carbon, are the carbon benefits the same in either? Like, I just am not getting that clarity. There's, I guess, to again, to Werner's point, the ROI, which may or may not is, you know, as fantastic or credible as you want to make it, but then there's the actual carbon consumption.
I can articulate it a little bit. So
Okay.
geothermal, we'd pump the water up from the ground or, you know, heat or cool off of that 52 degrees. And instead of using the outside air at 0 or 90 degrees to cool the building, to run those pumps is going to be cheaper than it would be to buy the electricity from Eversource, which runs about 79% of its energy by burning fossil fuels. So that's sort of the carbon benefit. I don't have the numbers to quantify how many trees would be saved or how much less oil or you know emissions would be put out into the atmosphere because of it. But that's the value of what you're paying for. It's cheaper to heat the building. It's cheaper to cool the building, and you're consuming less fossil fuels by using the renewable energy of ground source water. And
But aren't we using a renewable source either way?
No, we're just using electric energy instead of burning fossil fuels, heat or oil on the site to heat the building.
I see.
And so you use a lot more electricity if you're using air source heat pumps. But again, I just feel like, to be clear about this ROI thing, it seems to me that when that calculation was done a while ago, the ROI wasn't favorable to ground source because upfront costs are pretty high. But we made the judgment anyway to put it in as an ad alternate. The ROI is going to get worse with these new numbers, right? These numbers show higher capital costs, upfront costs than before. So when we look at the ROI, it's going to be less favorable. And that's still worth doing, because if it's terrible, then maybe you drop the idea. But if it's still in the same ballpark and we say it's worth it to the town to do the right thing, as Jim said, then you go ahead and do it. But again, the last thing I'd like to say is again, it's not like just because this money's coming from the federal government, it's free money, because it could be used, as we know, there are lots of other things that we would like to do in Brookline with the money. But it is a source of capital right now. That means that in the long term, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, this building will be using all the way through that, from day 1 to day 40. From 40, we'll be using a lot less, quite a bit less electricity, and that will be helping the town and the school committee by lowering that as an operating cost.
Werner, is there a way to, following up on what Matt said, to capture the impact on the carbon footprint in a little bit more of a concrete way to present?
Our engineer could probably help with that.
Yeah, the engineer can probably come up with something. To tell you the truth, I tend to be anti-statistics on things like that. I mean, it's, first of all, you're talking about what not just this year, but what's happening 40 years from now, that number is, different people argue about how green the grid is right now. That what 79% figure somebody just used, I think that's probably accurate. Some people would, depends on whether you count hydro in there. None of us know how fast we're going to, the grid is going to become green. There's so many variables here that I think there's a real danger of false precision when you get numbers like this. That it's good to look at some numbers, but they're not going to make it. They're not going to answer the question for you, really.
So I think in order for us to make a good decision, we need to get some of the information. It sounds like, first of all, we need to work on making sure we can replace the generator. That's without a doubt that needs to happen.
Yep.
But I think we've given ourselves a little bit of breathing room to go ahead and get the numbers, get the best numbers you can get, and then I think we can decide whether to go to bat for it. And I'm pretty sure we will, if the numbers aren't as high as what you're showing. So does that sort of sum what people are thinking, or? Andy,
Heather, yeah, I'm just trying to get clear on what our timeline is then and how it relates to the meetings of other boards. Like
the Board of Selectmen doesn't have another planned meeting, correct, Melissa?
Not till the 31st, but we'll be launching the site. So then project requests could be submitted.
I think, you know what, I don't think, I agree with Mariah, this is not the place to discuss it. I think it sounds like we will be having a town school partnership, hopefully in the near future. And that could be the place where it should originally be discussed, like Carla and Mariah said. I think, if we join forces, we can schedule and invite do the board of selectmen have to schedule it? Or can you guys schedule it?
Other members can convene it. It doesn't have to be
Well,
the chair who convenes.
And there was a
Okay.
joint meeting a couple weeks ago with the school committee, so it is possible.
Right, exactly. So I think I would ask the two of you to try and get that set up in the next, maybe in 2 weeks. By then you should have the numbers, or even before. And let's start to move on that front. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that this is a special project, as we've talked about, but I also think that it would be helpful to contextualize this ask within other things that we're thinking about. And so to whatever extent we have more information about the other requests that we have pending, I think that would be helpful too.
And again, this is something we're reacting to the town on, right? We have a lot of other project priorities that we're dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to provide information here in a separate project now. So, we're happy to provide as much information as you want, but this is a little bit of what I'll say is a distraction to our project, right? As we look to deal with the many issues we're dealing with on a daily basis. So we'll get you as much information as we can. But again, it was a endeavor that made sense at 3.1 million. At what point does it not make sense? I guess that's my question. But as you guys want to get more information and deal with ROI and other things, we can get you that. But if it's still an initiative you want to do, let's decide on it. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Jim, have you ever heard of a town actually making a decision and going? How tall is that hurdle you just set up for us to jump over?
My last speech was because I get nervous. Mariah, you're absolutely right. No, we're not. None of us are. We're not fast moving when in a larger group, right? That's part of the issue. So sometimes I just like to hit the group over the head a little bit, but
it was inspiring. Thank you.
It was duly felt.
Yeah.
The train will leave the station, and to catch it later costs more.
Yeah, we're all trying to keep up with that train now. That's the difficulty.
Yeah.
But we're here to support you, and we'll get you whatever information you need.
Yeah. And what's clear to me is going to the select people tonight is not the way to
Yeah,
to go at this point. I think we
Yeah.
need some better numbers.
we need our best foot forward. Helen,
Right.
To your point, yep.
If I might suggest though, I think informally letting members of the board know.
Oh, yeah.
that This may be coming their way would be really helpful.
Yeah.
You know, one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
No committee.
I actually, I didn't mention it before, but I did talk to John Van Scoyac, but I was talking 2.8 million at the time because that was what I remembered as the number.
Right.
So
Andy's point.
I have
that's,
to pop off and go to the board meeting now, so.
okay.
Thanks, Melissa. Guys, thank you very much.
you.
Thanks, Melissa.
And guys, we'll continue on our fact-finding mission, okay?
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you. And we
You're welcome.
will, I'll be at the building commission and from that we'll figure out where we go or we will talk before then
Okay.
even.
And
Okay.
Helen, I'm around whenever you need me, right? Okay.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys.
And you might
Thank
also,
you.
you might also want to talk to Tony Quigley in the building department.
Yeah.
You know,
He's in charge of the project, yes.
yeah.
Actually, he's in the loop. He's not overly excited about the timing of it either.
Right, but, you know, he may be helpful in providing guidance on talking about this to the building commission. I think.
We talked about that this afternoon already.
Matt's in contact with him. So I think that's
Yeah, and sometimes other people can be in contact with.
absolutely, absolutely. Good point. Good point. Okay. So as to your point, Mariah, about other items that we might want to think about, these are just things that I've come up with. There may be other things that other people have thought about too. And maybe we'll discuss some of this in Charlie's capital improvements report, which right now we probably should go to, except I would like to just quickly discuss the electric buses and Matt's investigation into that. So just to give people background, a couple of years ago, Matt and I met with a bus company who were pushing electric buses, buying, the purchase or lease of electric buses for districts. And they showed them to us. They looked real nice. They, made a lot of sense. There was a cost to it. And at that point, there was no possibility of any kind of source of funding. And, this is a possibility, not necessarily. Right now, we pay how much, Matt, a year for our bus rentals? With the bus.
For bus service, cost of a bus is right around $90,000 a year. I think we're at $500 a day. I could look it up. With everything else that's gone on today, that has escaped me. But I do have, the summary and the outline, and I will. I've pulled that up and we'll send it to everybody from 2019. If folks want a brief look at going over what it would take to put electric buses in house. We did. Our transportation coordinator did go to a bus show in Rhode Island about a month ago. To sort of see the advancements in the pricing of the buses. It stayed about the same, but the some of the other costs might have changed. So I'll just, if folks are okay with it, I'll share my screen in a second.
While he's doing that, I'd just like to mention that I can see this as a town school partnership on the buses, that they could be used by the rec department, certainly in the summer. They could be used by the Council on Aging during the day when we're not using them for school purposes. And they would, be, the carbon footprint of our buses, which is pretty bad, I think, could be mitigated. I'm a big fan of electric vehicles. But go ahead, Carla.
Does any company lease them, or is any company planning on leasing them?
There are other companies that lease the diesel buses. We could probably look into it, but generally it's a financing to own them, and there aren't too many vendors, or at least last time we looked, And when we went out to bid, they didn't bid, and we didn't get any bids with electric buses. We were fortunate to go from one bidder to two, at least with Metco. Eastern Bus Company has been our provider in town for 30 some odd years. And the name of the bus company is escaping me that provides our Metco service. But they might be interested.
Locomotion?
Locomotion. Thank you, Helen.
They do all the private schools.
They do the private schools and they do Metco, and I think they do a Voc Tech school. They used to be in the public school business, and then they left about 10 years ago, and they seem to be thinking about getting back into it. But with that, I'll sort of share a summary of the costs of the project that really haven't changed too much. So when we did this in 2019, we were looking at regular day and Metco bus service, regular to and from school, in-house cost to do that with electric buses, and then the cost difference. And then cost to bring it in-house. You know, we had capital financing. You know, we got to come up with money for charging stations and that infrastructure, an estimate for maintenance, insurance, even though we'd be self-insured. Drivers and wages, that's, you know, gone up in the last 2 years, obviously. Health insurance has gone up a little bit. The FICA tax is tied to the driver's wages. Local pension assessment is based off of, you know, whatever the wages are. A percentage of that goes into the pension fund. And then I will send this to folks. I got the backup for how I came up with all this stuff. So it's it's a little bit malleable if people wanted to change the interest rate, tinker with it a little bit.
Well, the other piece too, if we weren't borrowing but paying,
Right.
we
wouldn't
say
have the finance
800,
cost.
so it would be a 700,000 in-house cost compared to what we're paying now.
No, interest payment, yes.
Compared to what our costs are for our bus contracts a year.
I'd have to do that. I'd have to calculate that out to make sure, but you know, the interest cost for 13 buses over 7 years for electric buses, it'd be about $995. But interest rates are much better now than they were just a couple of years ago. If anybody has a mortgage and you haven't refinanced in 2 years, there's a tip for you.
So,
And the cost of electricity? For
Cost of electricity is fairly closely tied still to fossil fuels. So
right.
as those go up, eventually the electric company, the utility providers in Massachusetts get to reset their rates. They get at least 2 cracks at it per year, and sometimes they get more.
but there's the cost of gas is higher.
No, I'm just.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, the cost of gas sort of gets passed on to us through the cost of electricity. It just lags.
No, I'm just trying to think of the all-in costs of, you know, what we'd have to have, how much cash we would have to have in order to maintain our own buses. I guess the other question, this came up at an earlier discussion, was would they be garaged?
And that's the gray there, is where would we put it? But this was before we had property up at Newbury. So the question is, you know, where would we park the buses? And we figure we would need about 13 of them. So park them and charge them and pay for the infrastructure. And the maintenance would be less than your typical fossil fuel vehicle. It's really, you know, brakes, tires, some shock struts, windshield wipers. There's, you know, since the motor's electric, there's a lot less overall maintenance to the vehicle. But some things you still have to have happen. So, you know, we might be able to do that without building a separate garage for the school vehicles where they could go in and out of the DPW garage, or we still might need someplace else. But that, you know, even with the annual difference of about $700,000, you know, where to put them and where to house them was sort of the wild card in, you know, property acquisition, and whether or not the town would want to use property for that, you know, I'm not sure, but those are sort of the main variables. I'm gonna stop sharing, I guess, at this point so I can see folks.
And the life
What-
expectancy is how long?
Well, they figure the batteries are good for about 7 to 8 years.
Okay.
But they don't know.
They don't
that's-
know because they've really been around about 2 or 3 years.
And,
It may be longer.
and the buses aren't likely to rust out before that, so that's not.
No, and we are able to wash them. The DPW does have a garage, so they could be run through and rinsed. But earlier in my career, I worked for the town school department in Carver, and we owned and operated our own vehicles. And we got, basically 11 to 13, 14 years out of a school bus because we maintained them, we cared for them, and we never really had problems with them, rusting out. So, if they're washed several times a year and the salt and stuff's off them, they can last. But you have to make, if you don't do some preventative maintenance, it's the old, Fram oil filter. It's pay now or pay more later.
You said 13 buses, but I thought we don't run that many buses in town.
Well, when we came up with this before, I'm going to share my screen again. I'll show you where we came up with that amount. So we got 6 regular day buses. We need a spare bus in case one was down.
So that's 7.
We need an athletic bus, and then we need the 5 Metco buses. Or we could still contract that out.
Right. That would make more sense.
To bring it all in, it's how we got to the 13.
And the athletic buses can't use the other buses.
We need at least one because sometimes sports start right after high school, but we still have other buses on the road, right? Our sports is fairly staggered, but we need at least one. And, of course, there'd be times when we need to contract out for, athletic bus service as well. But, and if things are starting later, I'll call it post 4 o'clock, then our buses would be back and available. So that's where we got the higher number to just make sure we were capturing everything. Did I ever put that up? So here it is there. 6 new buses, spare bus.
Can you make that like 1,000 times bigger?
Yes, sorry. That better?
Yes.
Can you read
thank
that?
you. Yep.
So 6 new buses, a used bus, athletics bus, and 5 Metco buses. Running them across gets us to 13. So that's how we got there, even though our regular school day, not counting the Metco program, we're running 6 buses, 4 elementary, 2 for the high school.
Matt, I had a question. I should know this, but what's the farthest school that we play in athletics?
Anecdotally, we've played Plymouth in the playoffs.
So
we went down to Plymouth. I mean, when you get to the state tournament, you kind of go where the other good teams are, and wherever the league and Maya set things up. That's the farthest trip that I'm aware of. So a good 50 miles potentially.
But enough to go without recharging.
That's where it'd be kind of close because they say the bus is supposed to get about 125 miles, and we don't really. I don't have. I'll call it supreme confidence that that's always going to work, because cold hills, things of that nature may drain in the batteries, and you might not get that range as they call it. But it doesn't feel like a range if you've got a bus full of kids. Right, it's got to work.
Part of conditioning is pushing school buses.
Well, but I think also we can't, for the one-off like Plymouth, that's,
Right.
Weymouth is probably as far as we really, I think, in our district that we go. And that's certainly less. And we do have, and if we have one, the spare one with gas, we could use that one for the further. I mean, there's ways of working, it would seem to me, around this. I think the question becomes, what is the payoff? Does it make sense? it's certainly carbon neutral. And it's the way things are going. Do we wait to see if there's a grant from the federal government to start doing this, or that they're subsidizing some of it so that the costs are less for districts? You know what I mean? I think
Matt,
what
did you
would be
show
good.
what the operating costs are likely to be sort of going forward year by year, or did I miss that?
It's on the tabs. I can share that
Well,
again.
you know what? I'm going to be careful of our time right now. Everybody can look at that. This is not a critical decision-making piece today. I think it was to talk about it, get some thoughts, maybe get some better numbers. I'll look at it together with Matt and see if, we can pare down some of the numbers of buses even, because that will help with the costs too. And come back to this group with it. But I wanted us to at least have the initial conversation and get some thoughts from people in general, what you would want to see, what information.
Okay, would you mind at least sharing that whole spreadsheet with tabs?
Yeah, I sent that off to folks. Carla, I added you too. So it's not current FY22 numbers, but the principles would still be the same.
So maybe get back to Matt after you've had a chance to look at it with questions, and we can table this discussion for further discussion at the next meeting. But this is certainly something it's a one-time expense that we may want to think about for ARPA.
Yeah, the setup is the hard part for getting into the owning and operating of buses. After that, where you maintain them and you take care of them, you generally can squeeze more life out of your capital than a vendor who's going to honor the bid specs and say, oh, the buses can't be more than 5 years old or 6 years old. When you own and operate, you have confidence in your maintenance and in your vehicles to kind of get the full useful life out of them.
Okay. Anything else on this?
I don't think so for now. Charlie's been waiting if he's still
Yeah,
here.
I would like, Charlie, you're there. Yes. We're going to move on to the CIP, and I think that's about as far as we're going to get today in terms of what we need to do. One of the things that I certainly want to talk about in terms of ARPA funds too is, catching up on the repair and maintenance list that Charlie has, the long maintenance list that I can't remember the total amount, but I'm sure Charlie will help us. Charlie, are you there?
Can I make one last, while Charlie's coming on, one last comment though, Helen?
Of course.
Just as
Make more
we're
than one.
hearing that the launch of this portal and sort of some of these discussions about ARP money. Sorry, hold on. I'm not, as that happens, maybe we should schedule a special meeting to sort of get caught up on what we think about ARP. That would be helpful.
Okay.
And talk about the other things other than what we've talked about today.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you all for inviting me. I think I'm going to excuse myself if I may. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you,
Bye-bye.
Matt in particular, but all of you for your support on these green initiatives. It's really it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Charlie,
Yes, I'm here.
do we get to see you?
We can try.
We saw you before.
It might crash. Can't promise it's gonna stay up.
If everybody can mute, that might help him, maybe. No, he's okay.
Well, FY 21, 22, and 23. FY 21 and 22 essentially didn't have a lot of work done because we didn't have a lot of capital funds. Primarily, we used to get what's called mini CIP funding, which we could take care of a lot of those things you mentioned on that list, Helen. The list needs to be updated again because there's been things happening over the last 2 years.
Charlie, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it is hard to understand you. I don't know if others are having the same problem or it's just me. Maybe we won't look at you and you'll just talk to us. Though I would prefer to look at you.
Is that a little better?
Oh, yes, much.
Okay.
We'll take your
At Town
voice
Hall.
instead of
I
your
don't know
face.
if we're taking the bandwidth of Town Hall here, but so just
Maybe
briefly.
that's something else, Carla, for the ARP.
Yeah, I know. Briefly, though, I just wanted to go over some things that were done. A lot of work was done on COVID. That funding came from the COVID relief money that we got, schools in town. Did a lot of work in the schools. Lynch and the Pierce Primary had new ventilation equipment installed. We did modification on other buildings like Pierce and so on. That's still functioning.
What do you mean by new ventilation?
The buildings had these what were called air transfer systems, where you take in air from the outside, fresh air, and then you use exhaust air from the inside to heat that air as it comes in. We installed those in late October to provide more fresh air to the Lynch and to the Pierce Primary. It was about, I had to get, it's a pro $50,000 to $75,000 we spent on that equipment.
Mhm.
And it's still there, it's permanent, and it'll still be running. So that worked out well. Going forward, though, we need to have a bigger discussion about COVID. And am I expected to keep doing the work that I've done with COVID, including changing the filters and using MERV 13 filters forever? Or is it after the emergency is ended, which it's ended?
Ah.
Yeah, well, that's why we need to talk about that. It does affect the operating budget because it's quite costly to replace those expensive filters. But was it the presumption that that was going to just be like that way forever? With the ventilation equipment sucking in so much.
Charlie, just so that we get a sense, you have to buy filters no matter what. What is the delta between the two?
It's about, if I did the schools 4 times a year with MERV 13 filters, it's about $225,000. If I used MERV 8 filters, approximately the cost would go down to about 125,000. It's that much. And then if I only did the filters twice a year using MERV 13, it'd be about $60,000, which we had been doing. MERV 8, I'm sorry. We had been doing that in the past, twice a year.
Well, but we also have to think about the benefits of people not getting sick, even beyond the pandemic. When you have better filtration, you know, the asthma, the all sorts of illnesses that are transmittable in school environments, I think become less. I mean, I think we had much less illness in school this year, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I can't answer that question.
Yeah.
Charlie,
Okay.
what filters or what's the protocol going forward for non-school buildings for town hall or the library? So, you know, did
Good question.
they get the MERV 13 filters and air exchange treatment that the schools got, or a different one?
No, everything that's done in the schools is done in the town buildings.
Okay.
But I did install extra ventilation equipment like I did at the Pierce Primary and the Lynch, at the Elliott and the Sewell. There were older buildings that didn't have a dedicated ventilation system.
Okay, and how, or what are we budgeting going forward for the coming year? Basically, same question that you've asked the schools. What's the town doing in terms of, are they maintaining the same protocol, or are they going back to pre-COVID, or? Haven't we gotten to that
I
point?
haven't had a discussion with anybody. No one's actually given me any direction on it.
Okay.
I can honestly say that I had to cut back on the ventilation. It used to be 100% ventilation. If you remember in, I think it was early June, it was 103 degrees here. If you remember those days, there was about 3 of them, and I could not cool the buildings, bringing in that much fresh air and that much humidity.
Right.
I had to cut back on things just to get us through those 3 or 4 days. Schools don't have a lot of air conditioning, so it didn't really affect them that much. It was more or less the town buildings that hit us.
Okay.
But it's a great question. I mean, am I expected to be doing this permanently? And if so, yeah, it needs to be built into a permanent kind of a budget. And it is expensive.
Right.
There's also an expense of energy as well. Bringing in all that fresh air, whether it's in the summer or in the winter. We got through last year. We were running the buildings 24/7. And through meetings with Dr. Jett, that was pulled way back. And we had the air starting up a few hours before school started, a few hours after everybody got out. And that worked out well. And I did the same thing in the town buildings.
So, but then the energy costs, when you look at them compared to the year before, well, how much more were they?
I don't have that with me. They were actually very funky. I think
My recollection is, go ahead.
Well, the weather's been crazy. I mean, the last couple of years, it's, you know, we don't have any rain, and then it rains for an entire month. It was going into June, it was extremely mild spring, and then bam, we were hit all those hot days. The winter was not that bad. We had a pretty mild winter overall, so we didn't use as much energy on heating. But I have been looking at it. I was projecting at one point for the entire town over $1 million deficit going into this. This was a year ago, but we got through it. And I think a lot of it had to do with buildings weren't being used that much. So the lights weren't necessarily on. There were other things that went on. And the fact that the weather was pretty well decent for most of the year.
Yeah. I see Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, so Charlie, if nobody's giving you direction, I mean, I would recommend, out to the group that we would still want to keep the MERV 13 filters and change them 3 to 4 times per year. They don't always need to be changed quarterly. Sometimes, based on the air the quality that's outside, they're not that dirty. Quarterly is your typical manufacturer's recommendation. And, running them, for the 2 hours before school starts and before occupation and after is more than enough to clean the air. You don't need to clean the air 48 times in the course of an evening after you've cleaned it, 4 to 8 times, so to speak. So, that seemed to work out fairly well. It is an increased operating cost, but following the Chan School of Health guidance on healthy buildings, seemed to be relatively productive. We did have better attendance last year, but we did not have everybody in school because we had a remote learning academy, and we had social distancing and mask wearing and a host of other precautions. I think everybody was on high alert for a long period of time. I expect that we'll probably have a little bit more illness this upcoming year, but hopefully not too much. So there's just my thoughts. I don't know what anybody else has put out there to you.
I see Mariah's hand up, and then Charlie, I'll go back to you.
I was just going to say that part of what Joe Allen has written about is not just about the COVID impacts, but the overall, as you say, Matt, there's attendance and sort of quality of student learning and so forth that are improved by healthier air. And it seems pretty clear to me that we would want to continue investing in that. And I mean, I didn't catch the delta. How much was the delta of the additional whatever it was? Did you say, Charlie? I missed it.
It was like 225 down to 150 between the MERV.
So to me, it makes a huge amount of sense.
And the MERV. Okay.
It's from the MERV 11s or 9s or whatever they were before up to the higher
13s.
filters, up to the 13s. I thought some of them went up to 17.
There's a filter rating that goes basically from 1 to 17 or 18. The higher the rating, the more it captures.
I thought Ruff and Ridley was already at a higher number. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
They,
But
they
like
were, they
whatever
were
the
13s or 14s by design. Same
Yeah.
with Driscoll and same with STEM and 22 Tappan. Those were all designed with the displays there to have a higher filter system.
but whatever that delta is, that seems to me like an investment in student and faculty
Well-being.
health, right? Health and well-being that goes well beyond the pandemic. So
Does the
So
same
I'd certainly
logic
like that.
does the same logic suggest that we should run the portable HEPA filters forever as well, or are we talking only about the building level?
We did budget for and purchase the filters to run them again this year because it seemed, and we talked about it last year during budget development, it just seemed silly that we would purchase them and then, not use them. And last winter, we didn't know exactly where we were going to be in the pandemic. The time we were talking about this, we were also talking about bringing the rest of the kids back to school. So we budgeted for it. We've ordered all the filters. I thought they were all here, but then one of them couldn't get into where they were supposed to drop them off. So on Thursday last week. So they're supposed to come back this week and finish dropping them off. But basically, we have everything we need to start school as far as that goes.
Andy, I think in answer to your question too, we do need to do it this year, and then we can determine as we go along, as things change, there may not be the need, but for right now, I do think we need to continue everything the way we did it as of June.
It was about $100,000 for the portable HEPA filters.
And
to
Charlie, that
replace
being
those.
said, I think also, although we might want to consider doing like what Matt's saying is 3 times a year, but during the school year. You know what I mean? From September through June. And
We do run the buildings summer programs, and if you've seen the pollen this year.
okay, all right.
All the small ones are packed yellow and brown.
Well, then I can go with the 4
yeah.
times a year. I was thinking of a way
Yeah.
to maybe save. And the other thing too is to look at the filter when you take it out. If it doesn't need to be replaced, you leave it for till the next quarter.
That's true, but with the amount of fresh air we've been pulling in, and they do get dirty fast. So
Yeah, I mean,
on that point, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm listening.
I was just going to say that the small filters, the one that are in unit ventilators and fan coils, they've all been replaced for the last week or two. And the larger filters are being replaced right now. I'm trying to grab the guy. He's around here in town somewhere, but he should be done within a couple of weeks. So for the first day of school, everything will be done. And I did, although I didn't get all the money I got my request for my budget for this year, I did carry it to do it 4 years, Helen. And
Okay.
we'll just see how the budget goes through the winter.
Well, we're
Hopefully we'll have
working on
another one
that
more
too.
year.
I'd like to recognize a new record for Charlie waiting to say he didn't get enough money in his budget in the meeting. I think he's gone 34 minutes.
Look at that. An hour and 34 minutes. That's not bad at all. I think that was very
Not
good.
bad, not bad. But
There we go.
We certainly need to continue this. Okay, so Charlie, in terms of FY21, beyond the COVID work, was there anything else that was done?
Not really. We were shut down. We took, mainly it was large projects like the high school project. And
Right.
we know about that. We started, obviously the Driscoll and the Pierce are going away. It took many years, but we were also working on the solar projects, which finally started. And that would have been the Runkle School, which now has solar panels, and the Ridley School, which has solar panels. And we're just trying to get the paperwork through so we can turn them on.
Mhm.
The contractor wants to start the high school panels very, very soon, before September 1st, but there's a lot of people over there working, so I don't know if that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, where
And-
can you get in to even
Yeah, I know,
park
there-
or to-
and there's no place to park, and you need a crane for a few days. It's just not the best.
No,
Trying
No,
to
not at
coordinate
all.
that with more panels on the phys ed and the pool. So and
Maybe-
there's another project, though, the phys ed building, so. Yeah, it might be better to wait another month or so after school gets started.
or maybe
Happened,
during
Jim.
a holiday I don't know how long the process takes. How long does it take to install?
Depending on the building, the Runkle was already made for it, and the Ridley was really made for it. So it's literally just putting the panels in and plugging them in. The high school is going to take some time because they have to run all new circuits. However, I think if they can get the panels on the roof, get that out of the way, probably a week or two of disturbances, and everything else is inside closets and so on until they get on the roof. So I can't imagine any more than a week or two. But it's a week or two of having a crane. They were very, very easy to work with. They came out on weekends for both other projects, and that seemed to work okay. And there weren't
Okay.
too many complaints. So we'll try to get that done. The next one would be the Heath School. Now, the Heath School needs a new roof in order for that to get done. And Ray has been trying to get the project underway to get the Heath School started. Hopefully, it'll be very soon. He's not in today, but we're trying to finish up the new Lincoln School. And we're trying to start the Pierce Primary, which is a small little section of rubber in the back. Once the roof at Heath is done, then they could start, in theory, putting in solar panels on the Heath School.
I thought that was supposed to be done this summer.
It was, but there was a delay in getting the rubber.
Oh,
Materials are brutal. You just
okay.
can't find the stuff.
All right. So were those the FY 21 or FY 22?
Yeah, it's sort of
CIP?
blended from FY 21 into FY 22.
Okay.
And it has all to do with COVID and how the budgets got approved.
Mm-hmm.
The FY 22, this fiscal year, I only have, looking at the big picture, I only have monies for ADA, energy conservation, and fire alarms, which is significantly less than I've had in years past. So there's no money for elevators or roofs, masonry windows, life safety and security. All of that's been cut out, and also the mini CIP. So this would be a third year without having the mini CIP to do any kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
If we go one more year, it's really going to start showing, because I don't have money that I'm carrying in my operating budget to do that kind of work, and things are starting to back up. I know that well, Matt and Karen have been working on an updated list. I've been getting some emails from certain principals looking for more things. Several millions of dollars in work is behind us now.
Uh-huh. So what I think we need is sort of a detailed list.
Yeah.
By school of all the things, or by, I mean, when you say ADA, that's just such a big thing.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
just, it's that
that-
a little bit of handicap money that I get every year. This
Yeah.
year it's about $85,000. It really doesn't go far, but it does town and school things. I'm looking at the money that I get, $800,000 or $900,000 to do elevators and that kind of a scope, and we just can't afford it. So we're punting everything.
Well, we need a list of what repair and maintenance items are overdue.
Yep.
With the costs. I don't think we can talk in generalities. I think we need
No,
to
I
know
agree.
the specifics, and with the spreadsheet and all, that really details all this, because otherwise, how do we put
It's
together
in
this?
progress of being updated. It's probably going to be 10, 12 pages in the 12, 15 or more $1 million range. By building list of things, from wall painting to floor replacement, to other mechanical issues, stair treads, all kinds of things, fire system upgrades, like all kinds of things that, we kind of need to work in by building. And then Charlie pulls some things out of that list and puts them into other categories, but we should be meeting with him fairly shortly.
So can that be made in terms of what's urgent? What
It'll be broken out into, FY 23, 24,
Priorities?
25 stuff that we don't think should wait and stuff that needs to happen on the horizon.
Okay. Because I think this is one of the other areas that we need to think about, catch up with the ARPA monies that could come in very handy.
And for the high school, any potential unspent high school funds could be used towards high school deferred maintenance.
In the high school number, if you recall, this was many years ago. The deferred maintenance list was broken apart and the committee voted on it. But those things like ceiling tiles and painting and flooring were not approved. And they're in the $4.5 million range.
We're not
So when the high
approved by
school-
the
A
high
building
school
project.
project. Yeah.
Yeah. So when the high school opens, you're gonna have a fantastic looking addition. You're gonna have some areas of the building looks great. And a lot of the rest of the building's gonna look exactly the same that it's been. So if you
Carla,
wanna
you
get
will-
that work done, it has to be put on someone's list to get done. And right now it isn't, there's no funding to do that kind of work.
I just
But it's
remind
to that scale.
re-
Excuse me?
a gentle reminder that the eminent domain issue for 111 Cypress hasn't been settled. And so if there is money left over from the high school renovations, that is something people just might want to keep in mind.
And do we have a sense, Susan, of when that might happen? Or Carla?
No, I mean, it was sort of moving more quickly than less quickly. So I think that was one piece of information, but no, not for open session. If we want an update, we can have an executive session on it, but
Of course.
I would
Okay.
also say, just to Carla's point, I'm sure Carla knows this, but just for everyone else, there's something about, there isn't going to be, it's my understanding anyway, maybe Carla, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's my understanding there isn't going to be money, quote unquote, left over from the high school project. If it's not expended, it's not going to get bonded. So I think it's excess bonding capacity. I'll find the more accurate terminology, but I just don't want people to think that there's some millions of dollars sitting in a bank account waiting for us to spend it. That will, because I thought that that's what would happen, and then we would just roll it into the CIP, whatever was left over, and that's not what's going to happen. So
well, it does with the excess, the way I understand excess bonding capacity, because right now I think.
Excess bonding capacity is not a cash balance in the savings.
No,
That's
no,
all I'm trying to say.
you are correct. You are
Okay.
absolutely
Right.
correct.
That's all.
However, what it does allow us to do, so the town is at the limit, I think, of our bonding capacity, or close to it. This may give us some back, maybe not, because it was a debt exclusion. So
Anyway,
I'm
we
not
can get
sure.
more accurate information. I just don't want people to think that we're waiting for the end of the high school project to see what sort of cash is still sitting in a bank account waiting for us to spend it. That's really all I was trying to convey. So full stop.
Okay, but there is a lot of, and you said that amount that needed to happen was around how much again, Charlie?
$4.5 million.
$4.5 million to bring the building up.
Charlie, that was about 4 years ago, right?
I know. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that number might be closer to 6 or 7 because other things might have come onto the list. We got to finish going through it. Just as an example, we're going to have new mounted projection in STEM and 22 Tappan. The rest of the building is going to be about 7 years old. So we're going to need to replace those. And that's, for, that many classrooms, that's going to be a capital expense that would kind of go through the same exercise as replacing other things attached to the building. So we have a list with some decent detail that's in progress. We just need to keep working on it. And Charlie and his team and Karen and I need to sit down and sort of hash out and compare notes as to where we're at.
I saw Susan and Val both having their hands up.
Val, go ahead.
No?
Matt, could you clarify when you think you're going to have the 23 to 25 CIP, the list compiled between you and Charlie? And
I'm hoping to have it done in about 2.5 weeks.
okay, thanks.
Okay, and Susan?
Yeah. So we don't have enough time to have this full discussion at this point, but clearly the project, like the binder project, I don't know what else to call it, where we went through building by building and took the inventory of all of the rooms and all of the work that had to get done on all of our buildings. I would hope, and I guess I would expect that there may be some consulting capacity that A&F needs in order, the department, that Sam's department, Matt, you would need to be able to truly kind of finish that project. But it does seem to me worth investing in the end of that project so that we can have one comprehensive sense of whatever we've got, like what was it, 1 million square feet of school buildings?
About 1.7 million square feet. Yeah,
1.7,
Sam and I already
yeah.
started talking about a
Yeah.
master plan and putting together an RFP or Q,
Right.
as he had some experience doing it recently in Dedham.
Right. And this,
for
I
our
guess, would
buildings.
stay, perfect. And I guess I wouldn't want to wait for the master plan to have this answer, we know, because of the timing, but I do think that it's worth actually spending the time to get the fact base right, because that will form the basis for the master plan and form the answer to this question that we've all been asking for a while, which is what is our full capital need. So I don't want it to go forever, but I wouldn't want it to be so abbreviated and short-circuited that we, because we had to do it in an afternoon, that we weren't able to actually have the fact base we need. So I guess I would put it back to you all to figure out how to do that. But I would
So,
hope that we would have a good fact base.
Susan, you and Mariah were on the same page on this one.
Great.
And this is something we talked about at our last meeting. And that I know Sam.
2 meetings ago, wasn't it?
No,
Maybe
it was
our
just
last
last meeting.
Was it?
I
Okay.
think
Oh,
it was
honey, we've
just
been
that.
talking about this for 7 years.
I
Yeah,
know,
we were
but like-
yeah. Okay, so it depends what talking you're talking about. Specific talking about Sam and
Right.
Matt was last time.
I'm just saying,
So
let's get
getting-
the fact base. That's really, at this point, I just want the binder. Like the master plan, it can wait. The binder. I mean,
Well,
even
it-
questions like, what's our next big renovation project? Is it Baker? Is it something like what's after Pierce? I think we're all just so exhausted, and we've got to. Well, no, I'm right. We have a $500 million worth of capital projects going on in a very short period of time. So it's not like anyone's looking for the next project, but at any rate, I do think it's important to have so we can kind of prioritize.
Well, I am a bit confused on the scope of what you're calling the master plan. I mean, there's the issue that we've been talking about just now of $12 to $15 million of things that are overdue that we know need to get done at some point, regardless of sort of our plans for the future, right? And then there's the question of, well, where do we build a night school, or which school do we renovate next, right? So you don't have to answer those questions like in order to make progress on the first.
Well, that's exactly my point. My point is we shouldn't wait for a master planning process to get the binder right, but we also shouldn't try to I don't know, like we're going to spend a lot of time, if we rush on this spreadsheet, we're going to spend a lot of time doing that as opposed to actually getting it right. That's all. And I don't want to create rework.
Well, it seems we can't even go to the town with coherent ARPA requests until we do the binder. If Helen, as you're saying,
the binder, what is the binder shorthand for?
You seem to be saying, Helen, that a lot of this stuff you think could go under ARPA. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know well enough.
Conditions, no, the binder is a binder. It's an actual physical binder, which may be in Matt's office. I don't even know where it is. It was in Mary Ellen's office, but it was a physical binder that had every single building. All of our
I've seen that thing. Is that what you mean by I didn't know if binder was shorthand for like list of deferred maintenance. No, you actually mean that binder describing the physical space.
Building inventory and program summary. And
Gotcha.
then to add to that, we need our maintenance list by building, which is in progress. That's about 2.5 weeks out. And then the capital plan, which is not entirely separate. It is a little bit secondary, but we want to have that so that we're not requesting to put money into anything. And then a few years later, saying, we're not going to use that anymore. Right. Not that we have that problem in general. We would sort of reuse things. We rent space from 3 folks in town, and we would prefer to be in our own buildings. So, I think part of that master plan is how do we, gracefully exit our leases in a timely manner.
I don't
Okay, I'm
I-
gonna,
open up a whole another area of discussion, but I just have a quick question, and that is for your master plan, or what are the assumptions for class size?
the same as what we've always had in our, we wouldn't be changing them, except to put them lower.
But what are they?
I think it's up to 21 K through, kindergarten's less, but 1 through 3, I think is 21, and up to 25, 4 through 12.
And this does relate to the repair and maintenance list, is if some of the repair and maintenance was for, I forget the word, inappropriate teaching space,
Right.
and converting the closets and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah,
It seems sort of foolish to spend money on that if the space is not suitable to begin with, and no
Yeah.
matter what you do, you can't make it suitable. So all I'm trying to figure out is whether any of the R&M money on the list is for those inadequate spaces.
I
Go-
think,
Going
ahead.
forward in the short term, Charlie's here, he'd probably say no, because he just told you didn't have enough money. In the past, we did sort of expand in place because we couldn't get capital projects through quickly enough. So in the past, yes. In the future, no, that's not really the way we want to go. I agree, Carla.
Okay.
So let's move on a little bit to FY23, Charlie. And have
Sure.
you put in your request for CIP for FY23?
No, they haven't even had the training yet to go over that. They just did the opera on Monday. So I'm having that next week where they go over the paperwork and with Melissa. So sounds like it's going to be done, needs to be done by early September. So that's not going to give me a lot of time, 2
Yeah,
or 3
I
weeks.
mean, how,
Um,
yeah,
So same procedure, but I'm hearing, things that there's not gonna be a lot of money next fiscal year either, so, but yeah, we'll need to get that mini CIP list together. I'm gonna be putting back in my projects that were cut. We gotta get back on track. There are other projects that haven't been funded over several years, and one of them I have on my notes is the air conditioning, which I know is
right.
a great topic of many, many weeks ago. We were doing some work at some buildings for several years, and then the funding stopped, and we haven't done any kind of more work than what we have. So it was warm towards the end of school, and I'm sure you got all the complaints, as I did. Should we be continuing that further? And if so, what do you want to do? What scale do you want to do? What buildings do you want to do?
And what makes sense in terms of,
Yeah.
what we're doing here? I mean, at what point do we, tackle a whole building versus pieces? Mariah?
I think it was our last meeting, we talked about pulling data from a hot day to not just use the list of complaints as the driver, but real data on room temp. And we've had a couple hot days between then and now. Matt, were you able to get point in time data out of the control systems?
No, I don't have access to the control systems. We can check with Mark Sacco on that, but the heat spell we had in June, I did go into rooms where people were sort of complaining, and I think I explained I found one room that was probably overdue, should have been done earlier on, but part of what we had done the prior few years when we were doing things, we were sort of attacking the hottest spots on the top floors of buildings at Lawrence, Lincoln, and Heath. We added air conditioning to, and for whatever reason, Baker didn't happen, but Runkle, we added air conditioning to that as we were always running summer programs in there. I mean, that building's now 7 years old, but it's probably got the mileage of a school that's got 10 or 11 years because it never really gets a break. you know, that, you know, just as I was going through there and adding things to the list, we need to repaint most of the classrooms and some of the
Really?
hallways.
But when we had talked about that, I thought you were going to pull that data, maybe not you or whoever it is, so that we could have
I
a,
might
not-
have asked and maybe I missed it, but I'll check
Okay,
with Mark
okay.
and Mark works for
Charlie, does
Charlie.
he keep track of that over time or does he just do it daily?
Well, no, it's saved on the server. We can go
Oh, so
back
it's saved.
a
You
year
can
if
look.
need be.
But that
depending on
would
the
be
building.
great to get the data so that we're not just complaint driven, but we can look more holistically. You know, I wouldn't want the person who's been holding in their complaints to get penalized for.
Charlie, do you know if that's something that can be exported into Excel by like date
Yeah,
and
yeah, we
temperature?
dump it into Excel. Yep.
Okay.
But Charlie, could you help us out with getting that information from Mark?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that you were looking for it. I can work on that tomorrow with Mark.
That would be terrific.
Go
That
by
would
building.
be terrific.
Yeah, that would be super helpful.
So continuing on the conversation of AC, I mean, I think maybe one of the things, and this is once more building by building, well, it's only, well, 3 of our buildings, it sounds like, are basically taken care of. Runkle, Ridley, and Driscoll will be. But, and the high school has quite a bit of air conditioning, I think,
Partial.
partial. Well, and the
STEM
new,
22 tap in the 4th floor. You know, the rest of the building, there's only a few rooms that have air conditioning. Charlie could correct me if I'm wrong, but for the typical classrooms at the high school are not air conditioned.
The,
so, sure,
go ahead. I was just gonna say the A wing was done 25 years ago. That's all air conditioned, central air conditioning.
Mhm. Charlie, do buildings ever get retrofitted with displaced air?
I'm not aware of it. No, could be. It's essentially ripping out, replacing the entire ventilation system, which is a huge job.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, never mind. Never mind. We'll have 2 more buildings that will have displaced air. Pearson and Driscoll. But
Helen
oh,
and everyone, I'm sorry, but I need to go.
okay, I'm
'Cause we're
sorry.
at
I wasn't looking at the time, and it is 6 o'clock. It sounds like we're going to need another meeting yet in August, if that's okay with people. I think probably in 2 weeks, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, before Mariah leaves, do we know like what is going to be the PSB's and the school committee's process for figuring out what our ARPA requests are going to be? Because we've had it come up in very piecemeal fashion again and again during today's meeting, but we don't, you know, it seems like maybe we should start with this document that Matt and Charlie are putting together in the next 2 weeks. Those are the, you know,
Well,
those are the overdue things that we can figure out to begin with, what we could ask there for ARPA and then build out from that.
Right. I think we need the repair and maintenance list itemized with all the things. I think we can add to that some of the things we talked about today as possibilities, or decide whether those are what we want to have on the list. The geothermal, the electric buses, and the air conditioning. So those,
Baldwin.
and Baldwin. Oh, let's not forget Baldwin. Definitely Baldwin. So those are sort of the 5 in my head in the big picture.
So how do we put it all together kind of as an institution so that we have a coherent ask?
Yeah, and that we have numbers associated with it and a description. Yeah, and let's see if we can't, Matt, you and I work on that for the next meeting.
Yeah,
We'll
let's
pull ahead of time.
Yeah, we'll finish the list as best we can. The numbers may not be firm on every item on there because it's hard to get price quotes on everything, especially when vendors say, what's the probability of this being done, you know, this year or next year? And if you got to be honest with them. So, you know,
Well, I don't
sometimes they
think
may
we
just
have
be
to
estimates.
spend it in 2 years. I think we have till
No,
2020.
vendors don't want to give you a price quote on certain things if it's not going to be done until
I see.
2025.
I see.
Right. So you know, the things further out, they're estimates, and I usually just put those numbers in italics if we don't have any, you know, firm price quote to sort of back it up.
Okay.
Helen,
Yes.
I gotta go, but I saw that Linus came off of.
I was just gonna.
I know, I was just wondering, I didn't want to hang up before Linus said whatever he's gonna say.
That was
so-
what I was, where I was, we think alike, Mariah.
Yes.
Linus, did you have some thoughts?
No, no, thank you all for the conversation. It's certainly been rich. And I'm thinking, I think holistically how this work fits into the broader, the bigger picture. So I just wanted to come in and show my face that I'm here and actively listening and participating, though you couldn't see my face as I'm multitasking. But I just wanted to make that, acknowledge that what I'm here doing.
Well, I appreciate you coming and joining us. I don't know if you know Carla or Charlie. That's Carla Benka from the Advisory Committee, Vice Chair of the Advisory Committee. And Charlie, maybe you can show your face so that Linus can put a face with the, so I don't know if you've met Charlie. He's an important
We haven't
man in
met
the
yet.
system. You have?
No, we have not yet. Haven't had
You
the
haven't?
opportunity. No.
Charlie is a very important man here.
You know how we
Without
keep
him, our
talking about,
buildings-
we keep talking about building 50 classrooms over some number of years. Somebody actually had to build the 50 classrooms and that was Charlie, so.
Right, right.
No.
Also, it's a
Exactly.
pleasure to meet you both. And Val, great seeing you. I know we'll be connecting Friday, I think.
I'll see you Friday.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to end the meeting now. And what is 2 weeks from today? Does that work? The 17th? Does that, I'll check with Mariah, but Andy and Val? The 4 to 6 works well for you, Val? And Andy?
On that date, yes. Yep.
And Andy? Yep,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so Robin, you'll put that down, please. And I think hopefully we'll get a better sort of document together of what we would like to use the ARPA funds with. And Linus, certainly we'd like you to weigh in if there's something that you're thinking that we need to do. I mean, it needs to be, I think, something that is not a recurring expense, but a one-time expense. And I think that's why we've sort of moved on capital for these monies as opposed to other places. Okay, guys, thank you. Have a great
Thank you.
week. 2 weeks. See you soon.